Welcome to a very special Melee episode of Method and Madness. I am Brad Kelly, and today we're trying something a little different. I think we're gonna be doing more of these in the future, and we're gonna have a talented contemporary writer on to talk about their work, talk about work in general, and wherever else we might find ourselves. So, Dustin Cole is the author of the novels Notice and Run the Bead, and the poetry collections Dream Peripheries, and most recently After Sunstone, which is available from uh, uh, Farthest Heaven. Um, Dustin, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you. It's good to
definitely,
be here.
yeah, as we were talking beforehand, you back when I was on Art of Darkness, you joined us to talk Borges and Roberto Bolaño, and I really enjoyed that conversation, and I think the Art of Darkness audience enjoyed it as well. So this was obvious choice for me. Um, you know, I'd read Run the Beat. Oh, first of all, did I miss any publications there? We talked about Notice, Run the Beat,
No,
Dream Peripheries. No, that's okay.
and Dream Peripheries is sort of like it's a chapbook, like basically my first solo publication. Good
Okay.
luck finding it. It's pretty kind of rare to find, hard to get.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the three I would plug are Notice, Run the Bead, and After Sunstone.
Right on. And I've read Run the Bead,
And
Run the Bead, Run the Bead's great. So I
thank
one
you.
of these days I will get around to Notice for sure. But Run the Bead, I can highly recommend to people Run the Bead and After Sunstone. Um, you know, I- Before we kind of get into specific material, like I do want to talk about some details about After Sunstone, the genesis of it, and things like that. But before we got into that, one of the things we talk about on Method Madness, sort of specific to other books we're covering. For instance, we just recorded a thing on Lolita, and we kind of talk into, what can a writer learn from it? I'm curious for you as somebody who's sort of switch hitting between fiction and poetry to some degree.
Mhm.
How do you when you sit down to write, are you sort of you dialed in on a project? Do you say, you know what, actually I'm in a poetic mood today or a novel mood today? How does that how do you fit these two things together in your writing life?
Um, it's a good question. Uh, First of all, I would say that I'm not really working on any long form fiction, I guess, for the foreseeable future. Um, I think this sort of feeds into your question. Right now, I'm focused on shorter forms like essays, stories, and poems.
Mm.
And I'm finding that these three forms really complement each other, um, in my consciousness, I guess, if you could put it that way.
Right
There's a
on. Yeah.
lot of there's a lot of um, they're just very complementary, all three, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
can they kind of overlap. Like an essay can be like, if you've ever read Elliot Weinberger. I know some people who are
Mhm.
big fans of him. He does like found essays and stuff like that, and he's like a versifier of the essay, if you want to
Mm.
put it that way. Like his essays, not all of them, but like some of them are like versifications of the form.
Oh, interesting.
And
Okay.
so this is one author that really turned me on to how these three forms can complement each other and kind of borrow off of each other. And so
Interesting.
now
Yeah.
that I'm like working on, I'm writing quite a bit actually, which is good. I I think like the long form fiction was stopped being kind of like, um, I just became unmotivated to do it. It felt kind of like too much like labor.
Hmm.
And I respect
Yeah.
it a lot completely. Like there's no, like, I don't have anything bad to say about the form, and I love novels, of course.
Hmm.
But for me personally, I wanted to I wanted to um take a step forward, you know, in
Yeah.
the way that I was working. Um and part of it has to do with like um enjoying concepts and things and how different kinds of forms can feed into one concept and different stuff like that.
Yeah,
I guess that's one example.
yeah, I can vibe with that. I mean, in the long form fiction thing, there is this sort of, I mean, I finished a novel last year sometime, and I'm working on other stuff, but there is this sort of sense like it's daunting for sure,
Mm-hmm.
and there is like there does start to get to be a okay, I'm enjoying some portion of this quite a lot, but am I
Mm-hmm.
enjoying enough? Like, how much of this am I just sort of squeezing the thing, or I think of like chiseling the thing, where
Yeah,
it's like, I spent 3 or 4 years chiseling with hand tools, something that feels the size of a mountain, and it's like not only am I up for that, because you got to get yourself up for it, like do I actually want to do that? Is
mm-hmm.
that what I want to be spending every day doing? So it's I think these are decisions you kind of have to make because there is it's going to be some work. It's going to be work no matter what you do. A poem is work too.
Sure,
There's
sure.
no it's not an easy one poem is easier than a novel, sure, but it's still it's still work for
Mm-hmm.
there's effort involved. So there does I feel like have to be some kind of calculus about what's serving the thing I'm trying to say, what sort of fits best with where my consciousness is right now, what feels most resonant with, you get into woo-woo territory a little bit. It's like what's most resonant with my sort of energy
Sure.
at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, it's real
absolutely.
though. It's real. And
Hmm.
like it's a real thing. And novel writing is not for the faint of heart.
No.
And it's kind of like there's not a lot of interest in it either,
Well,
really.
that's kind of
And
where
like
I'm at too. You
and
get
it,
like,
it's just
was this
it's
going to be,
just
yeah,
I don't
sorry,
mean
go
to
ahead.
like no, sorry to I don't mean to interrupt you, but like
Go ahead.
the this is not me speaking from a bitter place, but
Mhm.
it's just the fact that novels are just not a lot of there's not a lot of interest in them,
Hmm.
especially like
True.
an experimental novel or like a contemporary like literary novel. Like the
Hmm.
it's just there's not a like it's hard to it's I mean even the people who are interested in that kind of stuff, it's hard to get them interested in yours.
Well, there's so much too. There's, yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
like people seem to still be wanting to write them, but like
Right.
I don't know who's reading them. Like
It
so
it does feel like I think some large proportion of the people who've read my novel are probably people who've written novels or at least are working on one. Yeah, yeah.
sure.
It's yeah,
And
which
like
is
so
fine,
it's
which
like
is great, but
yeah, it's like there's no I'm not um yeah, like I think I was bitter for a little while about it because it's just like wow, like I thought this was gonna go a lot better in terms of like interest and sales and
yeah,
more opportunities and things like that. But I was just naive to the whole thing,
yeah.
and like and whereas like uh working with these shorter forms is more like um how do I put it? Like it fits into my life more comfortably.
Mm. Yeah,
It's writing is always challenging. Like it's never easy. It's never quick.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
that's not what I'm looking for. Like I don't
Right.
it doesn't need to be easy. I wouldn't do it if it was easy.
Yeah.
But
But
what I
a
want is a good
novel.
quality. I want a quality of life too.
Sure, a novel is I'm sort of speaking for myself, but I assume some of this is portable to other people too.
Mm-hmm.
A novel is sort of um it, I know for me, if it's all about momentum. So if for let's say for reasons beyond my control, I basically take a week off.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2 weeks after before I'm sort of got my momentum back up, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a week off is really like 3 weeks off in a way in terms of productivity, and Yeah, and the process can you end up like sort of restarting a lot. It is difficult to fit a life around it. It's
Yeah,
very difficult to fit a life
it's a
around
big
it.
commitment. It's a big
Yeah,
commitment. And
yeah,
like if you're
absolutely.
not selling thousands of copies, I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah,
And
that's a
some people they
reasonable
got the
question.
love, they got the love for it, and all the power to them.
Hmm, hmm,
And then another thing was wanting to mention, like just based on what you said about like kind of losing your momentum and stuff, or like getting momentum and these
hmm.
kinds of things, like um when you're working on that kind of thing, it's like it's sort of mm, like it feels like it's kind of too much of a responsibility or something like that. It's like gets to me that doesn't really fit with art and the art life.
Mm-hmm.
Like and so there was that which didn't really agree with me.
Yeah.
Um and then how you said, like you're kind of like, chiseling away at this huge piece of granite for 3 or 4 years, like um it does end up being labor. It doesn't end up being
Hmm.
work. And
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course it's a nuanced kind of work. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of discovery in it, and it's very interesting. There's no
Hmm.
question.
Yeah.
I think that's why I did what I did in it. It's because it is
Right.
interesting. Um, but like you're like, it just feels like labor,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I've been a laborer,
Right.
and like
Right.
it just felt too much like that
Yeah.
for me, you
Yeah.
know,
No,
and
I'm vibing with this completely. This is like playing into I'm somewhere in the same process of thinking about it as you are. Like, I probably will write another novel
you
or
should.
several more because I'm a little bit of I'm honestly, it's partially because I'm a masochist. I've
Mm,
realized. So there's something for me that derives something I need from that
mm-hmm.
process, but it's not recommendable necessarily to another person. You know what I mean? It's not like, yeah,
Yeah,
you should write a novel. It'll be fun. It's not quite like that for me. It has fun parts to it for sure. But yeah.
you're also talented at it, and you've
Well,
done it
thanks.
quite a
You
bit.
are too.
So thank you. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I think that's one good reason, is like if you're
Mhm.
good at something and you've got a
Mhm.
lot of experience in
Yeah.
that form or that
Yeah.
activity, you know what you're doing to a certain
Right.
extent, as much as you can know what you're doing, like in a new text or a text that you're building or working on. Like I think that's a good reason
Sure.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
do something,
Yeah.
like and sometimes like all artists could probably relate to this, is like sometimes you don't like have a choice. Sometimes it just
Yeah.
haunts you and you just got to do it.
Right. Right.
And that's
Yeah.
real. That's real too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
Absolutely.
like it's not a cut and dry issue, and it's just very, I don't know, personal. And for me, like I just thought, like, I don't know, I was stuck, like I was like looking at more. I was like poetry, like those three forms I was saying, like the shorter
Mm.
story, essays, and poetry. Um, especially well, the essays and the stories, I had already kind of, I feel comfortable with them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like poems and poetry, I was never quite sure whether I was any good at it, or whether that was the kind of like text I should be doing. And I, a few years ago, like around 2022, 2023, I started learning a little more about it.
Mm.
Like learning a little more about like reading some theory from 20th century poets,
Mm-hmm.
hearing what they had to say, and um feeding into my.
Who are some thinkers or poets or writers in that realm that, you felt like you took something from?
Well, there's a few, like there's, well, the Olson essay, the Olson essay, projective verse, which is
Oh,
famous.
I don't know that one.
um we were talking about that a little bit when we had our event, the Farthest Heaven kind of launch event
Hmm.
for my new book.
Yeah.
So there's that. Um, there's a there were some Robert Creeley essays I read that I really
Yeah.
liked, and that made me think about poetry differently or like more deeply.
Mhm.
Um, there's like Spicer, the things Spicer was saying, and the
Yeah.
things that Blazer was saying, Robin Blazer.
Oh, I don't know
So,
Robin Blazer. Interesting.
so
Okay.
Robin Blazer, Jack Spicer, and Robert Duncan were
Hmm.
the Berkeley Renaissance.
Right. And I'm
And they're
familiar with
all,
Spicer to a certain degree, but yeah,
yeah,
these other guys are not so much.
they're
Yeah.
all different. They're all different, all worth looking at.
Uh-huh.
And they all have interesting things to say about poetry.
Yeah.
And so those are just some examples,
Sure.
like yeah, just a few little examples, and like so um that sort of like helped me, I don't know, like the sort of help gave it reading some of those things like helped me think about my own work with a little more dignity, I think,
Mm.
and a little more clarity.
Sure.
Um, and like also gave me some interesting ideas on how to maybe present what I was doing. Um, Also, how I could use my background, not only like my personal background, but like also my educational background for my poetry,
Mm.
and just things like this,
Yeah, interesting.
that
Yeah, that's
really cracked it open for me. And then
I
Tom Will's support also.
oh, Tom Will is a mensch and a very talented poet for
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like him believing in me, he
Hmm.
believes in me more than I believed in myself.
Yeah, that's
So he's
helpful.
so he's huge in it
Yeah.
all, right?
Yeah. 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 Folks, check out Tom Will. He's incredibly talented. Like no BS. I remember kind of just running into him on Twitter and I've got friends I've made on the internet who I think are great. And I've got friends who, I like them. I don't know so much about their writing. I read Tom Will's particularly I'm embarrassing myself and blanking on the name. The book he did that's like Pale Fire.
Oh,
Um,
Pale Townie,
Pale Townie, right, right, right. Couldn't come up with the
where he
title.
used
That
the
thing's
ends
great.
of he uses the ends of the heroic couplets
Yes, it's great.
and makes his own poem.
It's so good.
It's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
Tom is like on his own journey,
Hmm.
and it's really interesting to just see what he's doing um as like a um just the things he decides to do all make
Yeah.
sense within his own corpus.
Right, right,
So
right. Yeah. And
he's
it's
worth
truly
looking
it's
into.
it's truly an individual thing. It's he's doing a Tom Will thing, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, that's also something that I admire about what he's up to. And
Mm-hmm.
you as well. Let's talk some about After Sunstone.
Sure.
So first off,
Sure.
I know you talk a little bit about this in the afterword, but like, can you give us a little bit? First of all, the physical edition is great. Definitely,
Thank you.
like Farthest Heaven did a fantastic job putting it together as an object. Um, so
Thank you.
people will have a link to that the show notes. Definitely go check this out. Support what Farthest Heaven's doing. Definitely support what Dustin's doing. But tell me about the title, because I don't think the word Sunstone is in any of the poems. Am I right
No,
in saying that? So where does the
no.
title come from?
Well, the title was a hard thing to figure out for the book.
Mhm.
We bounced around lots and lots of titles. I had a working title that wasn't really committed to, just
Mhm.
something I had slapped on the poems I submitted to them,
Mhm.
and it was just like even a loose manuscript, not really a like this book was just a kind of accumulation of the poems I liked that I had written over 10 years.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was difficult to title the book
Sure, because it's you weren't
because of that.
you weren't writing them like I'm writing a collection and they're all going to
No,
hang together, right? Yeah.
no. So when it was time to kind of basically, we'd had the whole book basically finished. We had to like it was typeset. It was almost completely edited. There was just a couple little things I caught
Mhm.
that we had to fix. That nothing big. Like it was basically finished, and still no title though.
That's
And
stressful.
like I was like, or still no title we could all agree on because it was
Hmm.
me, Will Ballard, and Tom Will who worked on the book together.
Hmm.
And like and so I got to thinking about like my how I had kind of written poetry almost like as an interloper for most of that time, and had thought I was going to be a novelist. um, and then in around 2022, I went to Mexico. I guess that would have been the second time I had come to Mexico,
Oh,
and
cool.
I was like thinking about, I don't know, the word sunstone popped into my head,
Mm.
and then I didn't really know I didn't really know what that was like, and then I looked it up, and it was actually like a a thing, and it was
Mm.
basically this kind of quartz or some kind of thing like this that Icelandic mariners in like the medieval times would use to navigate, because if you put it up to an overcast sky, it would glow, so you could locate the
Where the
sun
sun was. Oh, that's
with
so
it.
cool. Yeah.
And then that kind of to me fit with what I was doing in my poetry, which was kind of
Mhm.
like just looking for, catching the ideas that, were a little bit brighter, that drew me
Mhm.
towards them, and was
Mm-hmm.
feeling pretty lost in my life personally, but then also I felt a little bit lost in my poetry. And I had published some poems that I liked, but I was like, you know, I wish I could just do more, or like better or as good, and like, but it was like not so clear to me what that would look like or how I would do it. It's just the
Right.
certain things radiate a little brighter and a little hotter, than others.
Yeah.
And that's just the way I was thinking about it at the time. And then I was like, well, why don't we call it like before and after Sunstone? And this can be kind of like that moment can be a kind of pivot point or a threshold or something,
Mhm.
whatever
Mhm.
metaphor you want to use. And like, and then Bill's like, well, after Sunstone, maybe. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, I like that.
Drop the before. It's cleaner.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
thought that too, actually. I thought that too. I was like, maybe just after Sunstone. I was thinking that when I was driving, I was like,
Mhm.
that could work too. I like that also. And
Mhm.
then Will brought that up. And then I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, like let's do that. And
Yeah.
then there was a few more, like there was still a little more discussion about it too. And then Will was concerned, that it, like you say, it didn't really come up in the collection.
Right.
Come out
Which
of,
isn't a problem, but it was it was to me it was such an evocative title that I was sort of with one eye kind of looking for it as I went through. Yeah.
sure. And Will was like, well, why don't you like he suggested I extend the author's note at the beginning. And I'm like, well, that won't work because that's just a isolated prose poem. Basically, it's not even an author's note. Like
Yeah, it's really
it's
good
a
too.
prose poem. Yeah, it's a
It's
prose
good. It
poem
gave
that
me
I
like
called an author's
goosebumps
note.
kind of. It gave
Thank
me
you.
like goosebumps. I felt like, oh, I'm in for something here. And the
Okay,
promise paid off for sure, but I really enjoyed
awesome.
that. Yeah.
Well, I like that too, so I'm happy you like it. And
Yeah.
like, and then so Will suggested that, and I'm like, well, okay, well, and then I had it in my head. I'm like, well, I'm gonna write an essay, like a postscript about this, which is if you want to, if anyone's asking me what I'm up to or like what I'm doing now,
Yeah.
that is the clearest indicator of where I'm going in my writing. Is the
Okay.
is the postscript of After Sunstone. So I was like, well, this is gonna be my way to kind of break out of where I feel, uh, break out of this place that I'm I don't want to be in anymore
Mm,
in my
mm.
in my writing.
Right, right,
And
right.
like, and so that's what that ended up being like. And so
Yeah.
I ended up writing that postscript to kind of explain, to give some sort of explanation, but not in a way that was too didactic.
Right. No, it does certainly doesn't feel that way, and it's this lovely sort of bookend. There's
Thank
something
you.
about putting a sort of forward and afterward that um I want to make sure I use the right word. It sort of it sort of makes the whole thing feel like it makes it even more cohesive. Like
Mhm.
if one or the other wasn't missing, there'd be like something would be, I think, slightly off balance. But as you read through the whole thing, then you get this nice dialogue. It feels like
Mhm.
with Dustin at the end.
Mhm.
It's really cool. I really appreciated how that all came together for sure.
Thank you. And like, just to for the record, I'm a big fan of supplementary texts in books. I
Sure.
love
Yeah.
introductions, like, when an expert writes about a classic, and you get to
Yeah.
read
Oh,
that
those are great.
introduction. I love that type of stuff. Like,
Yeah,
that's like,
same.
sometimes I like it even more than the main text.
I
So,
have definitely read intros who are written by writers I know about books that I haven't read. Uh,
okay,
not a
just
lot, but
because you
that
want
has
to, yeah, just
happened.
because you like that
Yeah.
writer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's literally like, yeah, I want to know such and such's opinion because I know it'll be about that book, but be about other stuff too.
Mhm.
Yeah. Is there not to totally put you in the hot seat, is there anything from After Sunstone you'd like to read? And if not, would you mind if I read one?
I think like you can read one if you want.
Okay. Okay.
Do you mind? Like,
I don't mind. Yeah, I just
because
don't I didn't want to
I'm
put
not
you
a
on the
big
spot.
I'm not a big reader of my writing, like
Fair,
but I'm
fair
totally
enough.
open to you reading one if that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which one are you gonna
Um
read?
Well, let's see. I had a couple in mind. Summary for 20 years. I like a lot. I like all of them, but just in terms of reading something, Summary for 20 years, or it's a little bit on the longer side, but I love Little Magpie.
Oh,
Um,
that's my favorite.
is it? Yeah.
Little
Let's
Magpies.
let me read that.
That's
It's
like that's something that I just I don't know. I don't want to like talk about loving my own work. Like, it's not
sure.
like that. It's just
Yeah.
like, I'm like, that one's really close to my heart. Let's put
Yeah,
it that
no, I
way.
get it. That's you write something and sometimes yeah, it's not even about even if other people like it necessarily. It's just like, oh,
Mhm.
that struck the chord that I've been trying to strike or whatever it is, whatever analogy you want to use. So, yeah, let me read
Sure.
this. It's one of the longer poems in the book, but it's not long, I wouldn't say.
Not too bad. Not too
Yeah.
bad.
Little Magpie. 1. I see a guy at Walmart with scorpion tattoos on his face, the kind from the Zodiac always turning. I see a bouquet taped to the signpost at Sawridge Creek Bridge on Highway 2 in memory of Brad Ghostkeeper, that sweet-hearted kid, that dynamic hockey player who drove his pickup off the bridge almost 20 years ago around this time. I see the motor vehicles nobody walking to McDonald's. The fat people, their fat children. I'm there too. I get a ride there too. From my mom, I hear about the spate of break and enters and thefts lately by addicts riding undersized BMX bikes, stealing costume jewelry from the novelty store, and lately 2 keyboards from a church. My mom says she saw 2 Hells Angels get off their motorcycles and go into Tim Hortons. In McDonald's, a cold young man in a hairnet gives me the senior's discount. I stare bitterly at his constellated acne. In McDonald's, I see in my head a kind of auspicious event, an image of the Hells Angels being rounded up by mercenaries and publicly executed, like in the Dutch masters on those long poles with the wheels on top, and their motorcycles melted in a great furnace, then cast as a pyramid called the Ziggurat of Folly, situated on top of their mass grave. 2. Waiting for my ride, I see a disheveled magpie alone on the bare belly of pavement, letting off weak single notes. It must be young, it's small. I see a guy on the approach to Sawridge Creek Bridge with BMX and backpack reading the message pinned to the bouquet. Thick-lined forearm prison tattoos, indelible like the creek, like the road, petty gloating phrases he could never live up to in a poorly done cholo style. This summer, the wildflowers grow in long ditch grass. They always did. I see them from the car, but they're a sort of miracle now. At dusk, I smoke a joint outside. I see the light pale in the west get milky like it did every evening. It never gets old. So that's a representative sample of what's going on in After Sunstone and one of my favorite poems in there. Um, you know, it's interesting as though that poem is one of my, like I said, probably among my favorites in this passage, in this collection, and it touches perhaps is not as strongly as some of the other poems do on somewhat of a theme. It's certainly a theme captured in the by the cover, um, which is just seeing, right? I mean,
Mhm.
and it got me thinking as a sort of discussion point with you about how important is seeing to writing?
Mm, that's a cool
Kind of
question. I
yeah.
like it.
Okay, good. It
Well,
felt a little silly, but sometimes I like asking almost the stupid question because it leads to more interesting conversation. So,
like that's kind of how the collection is presented and marketed, you
mhm,
know.
mhm,
And that's something Will and Tom, I guess, had um, recognized in it.
mhm,
Um, and to your question, um, how important is seeing to writing? I think it's I think it's very, very important because we're so visual as
mhm,
people. And like, but the one thing that a critic, Henry Vaughan, mentioned in a review of the book, one of hopefully a few that will come out
mhm.
eventually. There's another one that's really good too, but it hasn't appeared yet.
Oh, I've
Um,
heard of that.
is he said that he said something to this effect, like the way that we live, or the way that we are presented with images, and the way that we have to deal with images uh, in our contemporary lives, um, makes it challenging to decide what images to use in writing and which ones to use together.
Hmm.
So that task becomes a lot more has become a lot more maybe difficult.
Yeah,
Um,
that's well put. Yeah.
and that's Henry Vaughan, not me.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, but
but he,
he's identifying a process that you're whether you're conscious of it or not, you were doing in the writing of this poetry, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and like so, yeah, he was very insightful in his review. And I think that that is one of the tasks of the poet, particularly the poet,
Hmm.
is to make these more and more difficult decisions about,
Right.
I mean, in like not just which images and which ones together, but like the to the what ex, how how much fidelity do you provide?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
how nuanced of an image, how much
Right.
detail, like,
Yeah.
and so all of these things are quite challenging, um, but interesting. And I love images, and I'm always finding images online and looking through images and scrolling through
Yeah.
images, and I've always got my eyes open. Well,
Hmm.
sometimes not to step on dog shit or whatever, like
Right. Of
so my
course.
eyes are open on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
But like so yeah, seeing I think is extremely important to writing and extremely difficult. But then there's the thing about like what are you seeing too? So like there's something physical you're seeing,
Mhm.
something that your eyes see, but then there's also something called insight, which is like you're
Right.
seeing into things, the implications of things, or the sources of things, or the past and the future of things, so that like
Mhm.
vision and seeing can goes beyond the physical world. And then I think that's like possibly where like things might there might be some more mysticism involved
Yes. Yeah.
in
And
poetry.
I think there's a thing too. It's like, and I sort of make it a rule to never explain a metaphor, but there's something about being able to see the metaphor in something. Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons this poem is among my favorites in the collection is the line about the magpie, and you made it the title because I know it's in a way it's kind of holding this poem together, this seeing
Mm-hmm.
the magpie. And again, I'm not going to try to be like, here's what I think it means because it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. What matters is that I saw it in my head more or less how you saw it. Not exactly
Mm-hmm.
because, we're not the same person or whatever, but whatever you put into that image came across the page to me and sort of appeared in my mind, right? And
Mm-hmm.
hit me in an emotionally resonant way that sort of sang with the rest of the poem. And to me, that's when poetry is sort of at its best. Is
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you can read a great poem, and all it needs to have really is one great image slash line, and then
Mm-hmm.
not screw it up with anything else.
Yeah.
Right? Like sort of don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. Give me that one line of greatness and then don't, and then close it close it down without
Sure.
screwing anything up. Yeah.
Well,
I
like
wanted to ask you, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
well, I just think that's a good yeah, you make a good point about like the this sort of like the line as image is a jet as a gesture,
Hmm.
like um but the gesture cannot get in the way of the idea
Right.
or something,
Right.
like, or the idea can't get in, like nothing should get in the way of anything else.
Right.
They should be like the idea, the language, and the image should be co-present,
Yes. Yes.
right? And there's something I think there's a mysticism in that, or there's something like un intangible, something unsayable
Hmm.
about that. I think that's like very interesting and very like something um worth worth spending time on, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
We were talking
Yeah.
about
No.
like novel writing and things like this, right? And
Right, right. No, absolutely.
yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, I don't really write poetry much anymore. I definitely sort of started off as a teenager writing poetry, and then I think I probably hit sort of I think my version of what you were talking about, which is like I came to a point where I felt like somehow I didn't have permission to write poetry anymore. Somehow. You know what I mean? I know that's ridiculous, but like
I feel you.
yeah, like what do I know? You know what I mean? Like I don't know any of the meter. I don't know. I don't really have any of the forms down. Like what do I really know? I haven't read. I've read more poetry than the
Hey,
average person,
either do I.
but yeah.
I don't have any of the forms or meters either.
Right,
So
right, right, right. And you don't necessarily need them, right? I mean, I think it's ultimately comes down to those are all the forms in the meter is all sort of ready-made ways to make it sound good. So
yeah.
you can make it sound good without that. I mean, what's what's the hold up? I did want to ask you just on the seeing thing. So do you, because I've been, are you familiar? I'm sure you've seen on the internet this like you get it's a series of images of apples, and on one end it's like nothing, and on the other end it's a bright apple, and you get these shades of them, right? And there's five
Okay.
steps, and it's like
Okay.
if you picture an apple, what do you see? Do you see an actual apple? Do you see like a cartoon apple? Do you see a ghostly, wispy apple? Do you see nothing? It's sort of a question about like what is your internal image production mode, I guess. I don't know if you've seen
Well,
this thing floating
yeah,
around.
like that's I I think I see a juicy three-dimensional red apple. in
Hmm.
my imagination, you
Yeah.
know.
You know what's interesting
And
is
I think I
yeah, go
have
ahead.
pretty vivid. I think I have a pretty vivid imagination.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
It's interesting is I've asked every it's not like I've talked to that many writers about it, but every writer I've asked about it has said they're basically on the same end of the spectrum as you are. And yet one person fascinates me. One guy and I'm just trying to figure this out really.
Hmm.
One guy a guy I know who is probably the best freehand illustrator I've ever met in my life.
Hmm.
He says he doesn't see anything. And
Okay.
I'm just sort of like, well, how does he to me, it's like when I'm writing, say, a scene or something, I'm kind of playing it out in my head to a certain degree. How
Hmm.
is he drawing this thing? The whole thing is pretty mysterious, I guess. Um, and you
Well,
almost
one of
wonder, it almost makes you think is writing is almost more of a visual medium, at least the production of it, is I think even more of a visual medium than we give it credit for. Because
mhm.
there's this abstracted layer of the text or the word. And yet it's sort of a visual medium in a way once it gets sort of rendered.
Sure. Like,
Yeah.
well, I you reminded me of a couple things here, and the fact that I'm reminded is a third thing. So, like, first of all, a good friend of mine, one of my best friends, actually my friend Laszlo, who the book is dedicated to.
Oh, I saw that in there. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, great guy, amazing.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, and he doesn't visualize anything when he's a big reader, but he doesn't see anything he's reading.
Hmm.
Like he understands it, he
Sure.
understands what's happening and all of that, but he doesn't picture in his imagination what he's reading.
Right. Right.
So I thought that was pretty cool. That was pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, because that's
Um,
different. I see it. I mean, I cast a character like
mm,
I don't usually make a choice. It usually just happens, right? Like some face I've been seeing, I'm reading a book, it gets applied to it. I was reading this, I was sort of seeing some version of your face in it, honestly, as the kind of narrator, you know.
okay,
It just sort of happens. Yeah.
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 Well, I mean, like, so, oh yeah, I like, so a couple more things, and then
Mhm.
I want to respond to what you just said. So
Sure.
just two more things, like so. This reminds me. So when I was talking about my friend Laszlo, and he doesn't picture anything. So this is like I think important because I don't know if like appearance, like you're talking about how important is seeing and writing, and I think as I do it more, I think appearances aren't as important as I once thought.
Mhm.
Um, and then this sort of reminds me of what Gerald Murnane says, and I know we talked about him a little bit last time we met.
Yeah.
And he was just totally an anti-realist. Like he was not interested in describing with writing the appearance of something, like the suit a person wore, or the color of their
Right.
eyes, or
Right.
um, like, and on,
Mhm.
right? Whether he had an umbrella or not that day,
Yeah, that's
like
true. What I've read of his, he just skips that over basically. Skips over that basically.
yeah. And so the so just this, like, you asking me about the apple and reminding me of Laszlo and thinking about Gerald Murnane, and just this, like, this is the interesting thing about writing, is just the way our brain kind of like um what's kind of happening in the mind.
Right.
And part
Right.
of that can be visual, of course, but it's not the only thing. And
Right.
maybe it's a smaller percentage of really what's interesting than I had in the past given credit for, and I think more and more I I give a lot more credit to.
Hmm.
So, like, I think this is the fascinating thing, about this kind of work. And
Mhm.
poetry's very good for this type of thing because in one text you can um, you can make a composite of appearances or images, but of voices, of um, just different, and of like facts, uh like all just different kinds of like uh stimulus, I
Mhm.
suppose, or
Yeah.
and like and make them all resonate together.
Right.
Whereas like in a narrative, like in a conventional narrative, like in a novel, that's not really, you can't, it's not as easy, it's not, you can't really quite do that. Like it's like
Right.
not quite possible.
You can get
Whereas
away
like
with it here and there, maybe, right?
sure, like but you
Yeah.
have to kind of like set it up and there has to be kind of a reason for it. You got to let the audience in on it.
Right.
Whereas like poetry just exists that way,
You're right. Right. Yeah.
and that to me is much more interesting to work with or work on.
Mm, I get
Like
it.
and yeah, like I've, you know, as soon as I sort of got my head around this stuff, like it took a long time. Um, Now I'm actually, I make a lot more poems now. I should put it that way.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
You know,
there is a sort of I feel like the blank page thing could be a little more daunting with a poem than perhaps a piece of fiction. Because I know for me, as writing a piece of fiction, it takes effort and you got to figure out, you're trying to figure out what's the best way to do this. But ultimately,
mhm,
I'm working on something today. I'm like, well, I know at the end of this scene, this is where the parts have to be on the table, roughly speaking, unless I come up with
sure,
something new along the way. Right. And so
yeah,
some of that gets that automates, I don't want to say automate, but it sort of automates some portion of that process because I know I got to move my little guy from here to there.
yeah,
Whereas poetry doesn't necessarily have that constraint on it. It doesn't have that thing that sort of insists upon itself to quite the same degree, which
that's a good way of putting it.
yeah, which makes it
Yeah,
appealing to me now. In this conversation, it's making me think, yeah, you know what, I should try, probably, because I have in my notes, I have a lot of marginalia. I have little lines I've
sure,
written that they don't go anywhere. It's just something
yeah,
that sounded good to me or it was evocative to me or whatever. Um,
hmm
so those seem like potential starting points. Um, I wanted to talk about one thing. We were when I first reached out to you to come talk to me again on this new Method Madness show, we're
hmm
sort of figuring out what the heck the show is. And at the time, I had asked you to suggest a novel that we might talk about, and you suggested "The Rings of Saturn" by Sebald, which
hmm
was instantly made me perk my ears up, and I'll tell you why. So I've only made one other attempt to read a book by Sebald, which was Austerlitz. And for some reason, and I need to revise my judgment and maybe just go back to it. At some reason, at the time I read it, it just bounced off me. I didn't get
okay,
it. And
okay,
and that's Austerlitz I'm talking. Rings of Saturn I absolutely loved. I think I'm in a
hmm
different point in my evolution of my consciousness or whatever. I think Austerlitz, I was also reading it in grad school when I had to read like 3 books a week. And so, I think there was like a thing where some stuff just didn't get
that
through
can kill it. That
somehow.
can kill it.
You're just like, okay, that's another friggin' book I got to read, you know?
Exactly.
So I think maybe that suffered from that. And so I was like, huh, well, I'm willing to give it another chance because I know Dustin's smart. I know a lot of other people have recommended Sebald. But tell me, what is it about Rings of Saturn for you? And I know it's something you're coming back to. So what is it about
Yeah.
this book?
Well, I mean, okay, so I've read, I think there's like just a couple things like I haven't read by
Mhm.
Sebald, or I never know if I'm saying his name right, but
I say it's
um
Sebald because it sounds the
yeah.
most sophisticated, but I actually have no idea.
Yeah, I never know. Some people say Zebald, and um but like that's neither here nor there really. Um I so yeah, I'm a great fan of him. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
And I've read The Rings of Saturn probably like 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
And what I love about the book, and I just reread it, because we were going to talk about it.
Mhm.
Um, there's quite a bit to say. Um, First of all, I love his narrative voice.
Mhm.
There's something very um old, like there's something a little bit old fashioned about it.
Yeah. It's
Um
something almost
he's like it's like he's speaking from, it's like someone who's speaking to you from 100 years ago or 200 years
yeah.
ago or something.
Yeah, there's
Um
something oddly comfortable to it. You're right. And I felt almost at times, not all the time, but sometimes it felt almost like avuncular, like almost
sure.
like I had these moments where I thought if he were to just like if he were to just be like, you're gonna die soon. I'd be like,
Mm.
yeah. You know what I mean? Like another
Yeah.
writer could present that same thing to you and be like, you'd have an existential crisis. But somehow with him, it's sort of like, yeah, I probably will, huh? It's
Mm.
like, I kind of just accept whatever he says, I suppose.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess maybe, so that's a good point.
Yeah.
So there's that. And I don't even know if I'm just doing justice to what it really is about the voice, but
Mhm.
it's there and
Mhm.
it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. So
But
maybe we
then, but
take
then
just a,
like,
let's, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
but like, um, another thing. So there's a few things I can say. I'll try and make it quick.
Yeah.
Um, his work with detail, like, is I think what some of the best.
Mhm.
It reminds me a little bit of Thomas Munn, but not really as conventional in his like narrative approach. But like the fact that there's like, an abundance, almost a super abundance of detail, but it never feels like a surfeited detail.
Mhm.
And to me,
Mhm.
this is like very special. Like
Mhm.
I can't think of very many authors that really can do that. Um, and then a third thing is the way he works with history. So I've read tons and tons of history. I have a degree in history, but
Mhm.
I've never read anyone who wrote about history like that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So those are three big things just about him in general. But then there's the things about the book, that the Rings of Saturn. And the thing like about Rings of Saturn is like, I suppose there's just something really, this the theme of the book, or okay, well, the motifs of the book, the motifs of the book are really just a um almost supernatural, um almost supernatural fortune, good fortune,
Mhm.
followed by
Mhm.
sudden reversals. And
Right.
that's
Right.
basically
Right.
kind of like that's the motif of the book for
Right.
me.
And that happens, so the narrator, just for people who haven't read it, there's not really that much setup. I mean, the narrator, who is Sebald, basically, right, is doing
Is and isn't.
right.
And
Yeah,
he would
right.
have
It's
said that,
not,
yeah.
yeah, and it's not strictly autobiographical, but I mean, basically, he's going on a walking tour of Suffolk County. Is
Yep,
that right?
yep,
And
yep.
it's sort of what if you knew all of the history of the area you were walking through, it's sort of what your internal digressions might be in a
Yep.
way, right? But it's more artfully done than that. It's not strictly just this sort of stream of consciousness bouncing all around the place. I mean, he will sit in a historical moment and really I was gonna say milk it, but it's not even that. He'll really sort of like break it down into
Mm.
until it sort of fits into what you're identifying as this motif of these changes of fortune that are
Which is
in that
decay.
sort of
It's decay. The theme is
yes,
civilizational decay. That's the
yes,
theme,
yes, yeah,
right? And
yeah,
the motif is these times of fortune followed by reversal.
right,
So if you want
right,
to be
right.
technical about like if you want to be technical about like the devices,
Hmm.
the literary devices, that's to me what it is. And then,
Yeah.
you make a good point about like he kind of like he so there's this, like you say, like there's a psychological verisimilitude,
Hmm.
someone who would know these histories and stuff.
Right.
And then there's also, and then there's also like this like philosophical verisimilitude in the way he
Right.
represents decay.
Right, right.
You
Yeah,
know,
and
and
this might tie into that thing I was saying, like if he told me, "Hey, you're gonna die soon," I'd be okay with it because I in this book I think I'm picking up on this pattern. There's a sort of a yeah, all empires rise and fall, right? And great
sure,
families rise and fall, and great houses
sure,
rise and fall, and you're
sure,
just kind of part of this. And even he, as the narrator, physically rises and falls.
yeah,
Uh, that's just how it is, man.
yeah,
You know? Um,
yep,
yeah, it's beautifully done. There's also I was just sort of making notes about like, okay, what is he doing here? There's also this great thing he does, which is he's sort of finding these like a lot of writing is about sort of finding the universal in the particular or finding the particular in the vice versa.
hmm
He's finding these very, to my mind, peculiar historical niches, sort of, and even not even just historical, like even sort of geological or
yeah.
ecological.
Natural history is a big one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And there's something about like the as an outsider, I've never been to Suffolk County. I wouldn't think of it as a particularly interesting place. I don't think of it as an uninteresting place, but it's not,
Mhm.
it's not the top of my list of the most interesting places in the world. Uh, and little did I know it actually is, right? But there is
Mhm.
something about him sort of
In the right
in the right
hands,
hands, exactly,
yeah.
exactly. If I wrote a book about Suffolk, it would not be anywhere near this interesting, right? Um, but there is a sort of thing where he's like, he's going to find the peculiarities of this place, really get everything out of him that's interesting. And then it suggests to me, I've also recently for a writing project gotten really into the local history where I'm at in the Detroit area,
Okay.
which I
Okay,
never paid
cool.
any attention to at all, to be honest with you. Um,
Fascinating. Fascinating.
and there's all kinds of amazing stuff,
I
like
bet.
weird little quirks, right? Like
I
this
bet.
road that I've driven by my whole life, it turns out it's named after this weird sect that was like imprisoned here in the 1800s.
Okay.
Anyway, so you find out all this stuff, but what it made me realize is like he's showing you, and I don't mean this word in a diminutive way, he's showing you how weird Suffolk County is. And it makes you
Yeah.
realize that like every place is kind of weird in that way, right? Every place has its own DNA that
hmm
is that has grown its own historical oddities and interconnections. So it's this way of like, if you look at Suffolk County close enough, you can kind of see everything. You can see at least the pattern of how history comes to be any place in on Earth. I feel like that's what's that's what really shook me about this book, and it to me it strikes me as resonant with this conversation about seeing because it's about not the literal seeing, but the sort of metaphorical seeing. When you look at this place, what do you see, right?
hmm
Yeah. So I can't say enough about this book.
Yeah, it's see, like all his novels are like this.
Right.
Um, I would
I know I was
say
reading the description. I was like, almost none of these are really like technically novels, well, or conventionally novels, right? Like,
not really, but
yeah,
yeah, they're
yeah,
they're perfect for me.
right,
Um,
right.
Vertigo is another one. Well, Austerlitz too. Austerlitz, I'd say, is the saddest of
Is
them.
it okay?
Yeah. It's just the one that's the most heartbreaking.
Hmm.
And then what's the other? There's four. What's the other one? Give me a sec.
I could look it up.
Oh yeah, the Emigrants. The
Yes,
Emigrants.
yes.
The Emigrants is the first thing I read by it,
Okay.
and it's also great. Um, the thing with the Rings of Saturn, I think that I think is special is what relates to what we talked about last time, and it's like Borges and Orbis Tertius is like a subtext for this book.
And it comes up. He talks about Orbis Tertius, and at one
Of
point, like
course,
takes it literal as like a philosophical system, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and so, but like the concept of that Borges story is very much at play in the composition of Rings of Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so, very much, right? And like, um, just the and like this comes back to what I said about how Sebald deals with history or deals with his sources, right? And like, um, we talked about this too last time we met on the copulating mirrors thing.
Yeah. Yes.
So this comes into play like in the narrative action of Rings of Saturn when he's sitting on the beach and he's gone through
Yeah.
some he's give me a sec
Trying to
here.
remember that
No,
passage. Is this the
let me just
go ahead.
let me
Go
just
ahead.
finish here.
Yeah.
Give me one
It's
sec here. So
it's kind of some aspects. It's the book's a little tricky because the connective tissue is sort of very light oftentimes. So it's kind of hard to remember like what came before what, I would say.
yeah, it's it can
Yeah.
be very disorienting. It's a
Yeah.
labyrinth.
Yeah, it
It's a
really is.
labyrinth. Then there you go. Like it's
Yeah.
there Borges again. But
Right.
like when he's at Soul Bay, um,
Right,
and
where
this is
was this?
like just a sec here.
Hmm.
I apologize.
No, you're all right.
I just want to give the place
Yeah.
just so we can orient ourselves here. But yeah, he's talking about Lowestoft and he's around that area and he's on the beach.
Hmm.
And then he starts in on another story when he's across the water in The Hague.
Right,
Okay.
right, right.
And then he's all of a sudden it's a year before, and he's across and it's himself. It's an image or a reflection of himself of the past of a year before. So it's like this geographical, this like autobiographical or biographical like mirror,
Hmm.
right? And not only is it like a mirror in that way, but it's a mirror, of course, conceptually based on the
Right,
themes and the motifs we talked about.
right.
And so that's the copulating mirror, that like
Yeah,
we get at the beginning of Orbis Tertius, right? So
right.
very, very much at play
Hmm.
in the composition of the book.
Right.
And just so to see someone do that with another text, or like to
Hmm.
get it to such a great text, and we talked about it at length,
Yeah, yeah.
the Borges text,
Oh,
to use that as a like a source for
right,
another work of fiction that's like steeped in history, I think
right.
is I've never seen
It's
anything
brilliant.
quite like it.
Yeah,
It's
no,
brilliant. It's brilliant.
it's brilliant. Yeah, and the thing is too, well, one of the things I also admire about this book is like that is all there, and yet as a reader, you can you can live on the like the surface of this book too in a way. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to know that to get a
No.
lot out of this book, right? You don't even have to necessarily notice that, but it is
It's
there.
a palimpsest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a real true palimpsest.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that made me think like, oh, this is a real like I mean, I've read autobiographies of writers and memoirs of writers. I just read Speak Memory for the second time not that long ago, which is an incredible book, right? But like
Mm-hmm.
this felt like, and I know, it's not that every word of this about the character is actually true, but this felt more like a actual writer's memoir to me because,
Mm.
as a writer, you have your life, right? But like you also have this like um this sort of journey through ideas and emotions and aesthetics that you're also going through that is sort of your work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um and this is kind of what it felt like to me
And
when
I
this
don't think
book is at its highest. Go ahead.
that's not
Yeah.
an accident.
No, no, I don't think so either. I think it's very
No.
purposeful. But like
Yeah.
reading this book is um the most how do I want to say this? I want to say this very carefully. Reading this book is the closest I've ever felt in reading a book to writing a book. if
Oh,
that makes
that's
sense.
interesting.
Because it's sort of we're gonna kind of go we're gonna go in a lot of different directions and we're gonna land, but like
Mhm.
it's not going to be straightforward. It's gonna go in a lot of different directions. We're gonna spend a lot of time thinking about silkworms. Are
Yeah,
silkworms gonna be important in the end? We'll see when we get there, right? Like
yeah.
it's
So
it's
yeah, there is a representation of the discovery we make when working on a text.
that's what it felt. That's what one of the things I was sort of experiencing as I was reading this was
I think
was
that's
that
totally
which I loved.
that's yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever like thought about it quite like that, but I can when as you mention it,
Mhm.
I I agree.
Right on. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So I so
Well,
I so I really did love this book. Like I said, it was Austerlitz bounced off. Excuse me. It's going right back to the top of my list, and I'm gonna give it another shot. And hopefully this time I'm, whatever those things are that affect your. I've also done this with
yeah, or you
movies
can
where I've
try
seen
like
a
a
movie.
like I mean, like I say, Austerlitz is kind of a heartbreaker,
Yeah, I
and
don't
like
mind that so much. Yeah,
Vertigo,
yeah.
I recommend Vertigo.
That's the one. Maybe I'll move. Maybe I'll go to that one next. Are
And then
there any?
Emigrants is kind of sad too,
Is
and
it
then
okay?
Austerlitz is the saddest. But I love
Okay.
his essays too. Like
Okay. Yeah.
Sebald is like my patron saint.
I can see that. I can see that now. Like having read, I actually read that before I read After Sunstone. I'd read Run the
Mhm.
Bead. Now that I sort of got to After Sunstone with Sebald in my head, I can see it. Not that there's anything derivative by any means, but I can see why you like that. And with sort of the front half of this conversation, I'm like, I totally understand why Dustin likes Sebald. It makes sense.
Mhm.
And it's he's a master also. So there's
Oh yeah.
nothing bad there.
Mhm.
Are there any particular sort of he goes on these the word I want to use is digressions, but that's not quite fair. But like, are there any of these sort of di- we'll use the word digressions that he goes on that are particularly evocative for you, like the historical
Ah.
stuff?
Mm. I really like the China stuff.
It was really cool.
Well,
Yeah.
because like
See,
I'm getting more interested in China
mhm.
and like just more interested in yeah, I'm just getting more interested in it. And like
Yeah,
especially like the just the heritage, just the
right.
depth of like the intellectual heritage of China. Like contemporary China is interesting to me too, but like I want to get into like more of the poets and
Mm,
some of the texts and things like this. Like it's fascinating and the
I
myth.
can see that. I got to admit, that's a
So
huge blind spot for me. Yeah,
yeah, and I think it
yeah,
is for a lot of people, but like
yeah.
there's so much out there, and it's a lot of it's translated.
Sure. Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's out there for the picking. Um,
Right.
but and so yeah, the China stuff was I liked this time around a lot. Trying to think
Yeah.
of some other. I like the herring. I love the natural history of the herring.
That was cool. The herring, I didn't know that herring glows when it's dead, apparently. That was
Yeah,
fascinating. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and like
I love the silkworm stuff, and I got fascinated. I was ranting and raving to my wife about the silkworm
yeah,
part, particularly just this moment where like all of this silk is showing up in Europe, and they have no idea really in Europe what it actually is.
mm,
Right? They know it's silk, they know it's this fabric that they like, but
yeah,
they don't if you were to ask them where it came from, they had no idea. They just knew it came from over there. People
yeah,
over there have it, they send it here, we buy it. Um
yeah.
and
And I like how
it's
it got
it's
smuggled.
right,
like how the
right.
secret got smuggled in a
Smuggled
staff.
back. Right. Yeah,
Like I love that.
it was
I
very
love,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's
just a
the
cool little
and
historical adventure.
oh yeah, and like
Yeah.
and then so like they're talking about it like he talks about it like how it sort of comes to be in China,
Hmm.
and then he talks about like then it goes into some other stuff, and then he talks about how it's pushed in Germany,
Hmm.
right? And then it's even like pushed during the Nazi regime and stuff like that. So like I really enjoy the well, it's not just the silk and the silkworms, but there's other things too that have through lines in the book.
Right.
And the way that he um it's like taking it's like taking an object in that like looks a certain way in one room and taking the same object and putting it in another room. And it,
Right.
not
And
that
then
it
it
looks
gets the light,
better
the
or
light
worse, it just
catches
looks
it
yeah,
different.
it's just
Yeah.
different. And it makes
Right.
the
Right.
room look different too.
Right.
And the
Right.
object
Right.
looks different. And he does
That's a
that
very
with
good way of putting it.
things. Yeah, he
Yeah,
does
that's
that
a
with
very good way
images,
of
he
putting
does
it.
that with like topics and
Right,
it's
right.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, I remember taking notes several times of like, oh, he's brought this back in. For instance, Thomas Brown, who I wasn't
Yeah.
really honestly familiar with at all before
I've
reading this
read
book.
the book he talks about, Earn
Oh, okay,
Burial. I
Urn
have it.
Burial.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's awesome.
Let me just read a quote from Urn Burial
Okay.
because I love this. This is Thomas Brown, God, what, 1700s sometime or late
Sure.
1600s.
Yeah.
Um, Quote, but man is a noble animal, splendid in ashes and pompous in the grave, solemnizing nativities and deaths with equal luster, nor omitting ceremonies of bravery in the infamy of his nature. Life is a pure flame, and we live by an invisible sun within us,
Yeah. It's
which
just
I just
like,
love.
and then
It's so
also
good.
another thing, yeah, Thomas Brown is really interesting and
Mhm.
very peculiar. His prose, his English is new and modern enough that it's not too like it's
Yeah, you
newer
can
than
read it.
Shakespeare,
You,
of
yeah,
course,
you
but
can understand exactly what he's
it's very
saying. Yeah,
peculiar though. And
yeah.
then like another thing he says somewhere else in the book, um, the the night is bigger than the day, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
something like this. It's just like
Right.
whoa, like
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. Yeah, that's something you could
yeah,
spend some time just sort of repeating to yourself and thinking about.
yeah,
I also love the and that's probably what I'll use as show art for this is the painting he spends time on talking the anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicholas Tulp, the Rembrandt
Rembrandt,
painting.
yeah.
Just love that like the moment of like the naivete about anatomy at the time, some of the people who may have been in the room when
Yeah.
this dissection happened, including Thomas Brown and including I believe Rene Descartes.
Hmm.
And it's just it's interesting, and it
Yeah,
was, I think, a good
who's who there, you know,
right.
of the
All
Enlightenment.
yeah, all just standing around like we're gonna cut this guy open for real.
Yeah.
Let's see what's in
Yeah.
here. Like it's just
Don't worry, he's a thief,
right.
so it's fine.
It's fine. Yeah. No, I
Mhm.
just yeah. There's so many. There's another moment that I think I liked maybe the most narratively is when our narrator goes to oh I have the name of he goes to that house oh what is it called? Summer Leighton Hall,
Yeah,
I
Summer Leighton
believe.
Hall, yeah.
Yeah, and he goes there, and this has been a house that has been,
Of
you know,
former
it's
splendor.
right, right. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy who really renovated it was like the richest man in Europe at one point, I believe.
Yeah. Like
Um,
he was like a railway
magnate or
tycoon.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And now the family that lives there is sort of like they're almost like ghosts. They're
Yeah.
like they don't really they've if a room needs too much repair, they just kind of close the door and that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
They were trying to rent it out as like a bed and breakfast, but like their attempt at trying was giving a sign to like in town to a store
Yeah.
and they didn't know if it never even went up. It's just this fascinating, these people living there, and they literally are like ghosts. They're difficult for the narrator to communicate with. They
Yeah.
seem to operate on like they seem to be living in a dimension like 6 inches away from everything
Yeah.
else. It's
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sebald is very sensitive to ghosts,
Is
you
he?
know.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's like
That's
very
felt
like
goes.
yeah, he kind of like his books are like haunted in a way.
Right.
But
I
it's
could
not in a
feel
like
that,
they're
especially
like
in that moment.
yeah, but it's not like spooky. It's like uncanny, I guess.
Well, there are
Like
moments where it feels like he's the only actual person in Suffolk County.
sure.
Like there are moments
Yeah.
that feel like that where you're like, is this is he out here on his own? Is this you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in somebody else's hands, that Summer Leighton Hall scene, I think would have ended with him running into somebody else, and there'd be like, nobody's lived in that house for 20 years, you know. It would have been something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be
That's
funny.
that's a very different
Um
version. Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like I like that's funny. I never even thought of that, but
Yeah.
um yeah, that's another great it's that's one that always haunted me, like the stories are haunted, but they haunt you,
A
like,
little bit. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
like, another, if you're asking about like his kind of his tangents, or the things that he um gets into in the book,
Mhm.
another one I really loved, um especially this time I read it, is the Joseph Conrad stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, no,
Joseph Conrad's
not a
story is
lot of
amazing.
people, not a lot of people know this stuff about Joseph Conrad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, like, Joseph
His
Conrad is, amazing. Heart of
he's
Darkness
amazing.
is
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh, it's a masterpiece. And his life story is, I mean, it's I mean, he was basically in it's a little bit TLDR, but like I mean, he was basically a child political prisoner in Siberia. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's not nothing came easily for Conrad at all, you know.
No,
Yeah.
but like, it here's another way that like you kind of like you get the displaced sort of, or not displaced, but um locations of this, the same thing as changes positions,
Hmm.
and where you learn a little more about like the splendor of East Anglia,
Right.
you know, and
Hmm.
he's there,
Right. Right.
and we're learning about him, and then he's there, and
Right.
like, and he's like just one of those guys with a gift for languages, with an ear for languages. He's like picking up English like by ear,
Right. Right. Yeah, it's fascinating.
and he's
Yeah.
writing. I think he's writing to his sister or his aunt,
Hmm.
in French.
Right, right,
You
right.
know,
He'd known I think some French, a limited amount of French as like a child. I think had learned some, but yeah,
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 and like
it's
the stuff
interesting.
with the Congo, the stuff about the Congo, and like, we get to learn about the Congo, the
Mhm.
nightmare of the Congo, but we learn it through the eyes of Joseph Conrad.
Right, right, right.
But
And
we've already read Heart of Darkness.
yeah, and this book assumes you have it assumes you know Heart of Darkness. Yeah,
Sure,
yeah,
but you
right,
don't
right,
need to. But
right,
like you would, someone who's like gonna read Sebald most likely would have read Heart of Darkness
right,
and seen
right, right,
Apocalypse Now too,
right,
and like
right,
all
right.
like,
Exactly.
like, so. And the reason why I bring up Apocalypse Now is because like it's not the Congo.
Right.
It's this like idea of Heart of Darkness, but in the Vietnam War, like, so. And this is the thing about Rings of Saturn, like, and other Sebald stories, is that like you're getting, it's like this, um like like history is historical places and moments are almost like interchangeable, and like
Mm-hmm.
but they're not quite interchangeable. If something is changed, like it's a little different,
Right,
and
right,
then it's interesting in a different way, but there's the ideas are there too, but they're a little bit
right,
different, and so it's like this,
right.
it's hard to really
Yeah.
articulate, but
I I think
maybe
the
I
thing
make
you
sense.
s no, I think the thing you said about taking a thing and putting it in another room and it looks different is really like the sort of the one of the many literary moves that he's sort of mastered in this book. And you see it in a bunch of things. The silk we talked about, the silk in
Yeah,
China and silk in Germany, it's the same material. It brings some of the same sort of metaphorical and poetic stuff with it when it lands in Germany, but it
yeah.
does look different in that light.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
yeah, and the train car, the Chinese train car looks
yeah.
and feels different in England than it does in China.
Hmm.
So there are all these things, these sort of juxtapositions that kind of, and they not only help you see the thing new in a new way, they help you see the space that they're in a new way.
Yeah,
It's
and
really
then this
cool.
I yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you got
yeah,
it, man. And like the
yeah.
idea of the palimpsest, the dragon is just barely visible.
Right, right, right.
The train's been repainted, but the drag the Imperial Dragon is still slightly visible
Right,
underneath that
right.
paint,
Right,
you
right.
know?
And
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 so
there's yeah, and there's a thing that I think that's he's doing too with books. So there's obviously Conrad's work, but urn burials. It's like this book is written on top of urn burial, and it's written on top of Heart of
Orbis
Darkness, and it's written
Tertius,
on top of Borges, and it's
yeah,
written on top of all of these things. All the good books you've ever read have been constructed sort of in the same way, but
yeah,
normally the writer doesn't point that out to you, right?
no. And then you're talking about
Yeah.
like geology and stuff like that, like
Hmm.
this idea of geology or natural history and like
Right.
layers of time,
Right.
you
Right.
know, and the accumulation of layers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like he it's like a cutaway diagram of a mine or something,
Right.
or
Right.
some kind of thing
Yeah.
like
You
this, like where
that's you see.
you can see the deposits of different layers of stuff, you know, and like you can see the
Yeah.
mechanism and stuff
I
like
love
that.
that. I love that.
He
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just a sorcerer,
Yeah.
you
He
know,
really is. It's
just
so good.
like
I'm so
Borges, a
yeah.
literary sorcerer,
Right. Right. Right.
a
No,
wizard.
I'm so glad you shared that book with me, and I'm so happy that I read it. I want to kind of close things down here.
Sure.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me, and I'm glad I got to talk to you about After Sunstone and just to have a chat about, literary matters in general. Um,
Mm.
the one thing I guess I wanted to sort of ask you is, um, well, let me think of it. Let me approach this a slightly different way. So I hate to be like, you just put a book out. So I don't want to be like, well, what are you working on next? Because hey man, I
Yeah,
just put a freaking book out. It's like, give me a break.
yeah.
Um but are there um are there things that After Sunstone didn't get to that you're like, now that it's out, you're like, either now I have some space that I can work on that, not necessarily even a
Mm.
project, thematically, intellectually, whatever. Um, is there an opening now that you see that you can kind of put your creative powers into?
Well, yeah,
Vague,
like I
kind of
mean,
vague question.
well,
But
no, it's a good question. I'm not gonna like say exactly what I'm working on, but I'm, you know,
hmm
got a couple of different things. You could call them book projects. Like but one's like gonna just like one I'm working on another poetry collection,
excellent.
but I don't know like when I'll want to publish it or when I'll submit it or anything like that. Like,
Take your time with it, man. Yeah,
well, yeah,
for
I'm not
sure.
like in much
Yeah.
of a hurry to like, because like the thing is I didn't know if I would ever publish another book again or even
Mhm.
right away. Like
Mm.
and this new book kind of fell in my lap. Um
Right.
well, I kind of had the work, but I was really kind of just trying to, I wasn't really satisfied with long form fiction, and I was
Mhm.
trying to figure out what, like I had was working on it. I had about 100 pages of a new novel, and I was like, again, I can't do this. Like,
Right.
no way, no way.
Right.
I'm done.
Yeah,
And like,
understandable.
yeah, and then I was like, and then Tom Will hit me up, and he was telling me about Farthest Heaven, and he said he had a new book coming out and was wondering what I was up to,
Right,
and then I
right.
sent them those poems, and they
Yeah,
selected, you know, probably about like, I don't know, 75% or 80% of
cool.
what I sent them, and we did some edits and things,
Sure.
and here's the book, and here it is.
It's the perfect length. That to me is how long a book of poetry should be. Right
Well,
around
that's
there.
I'm glad
Yeah.
you like it, like how it
Yeah.
came out, like
Yeah.
and how it's presented.
It's great.
So yeah, like to so it wasn't like I was like waiting and hoping to get another book out. I really didn't intend on it, which is kind of cool. I like that. And I like the way we put the way the book was put together in a discursive way. You know, it
Hmm.
involved discourse. It involved lots of conversation,
Cool.
lots of deliberation, and I think that like it's reflected in the final release. Um,
Yeah.
and so that was really refreshing, and I enjoyed that. Um, and then as far as like, so you know, I always had the room, even when we were doing that. Um, So I was working on new poems even then when we were putting
Okay,
the
yeah.
book together. And I'm working on some other stuff too. But I won't really say what it is. But like I've been just like I said before, like I've been working on poems, some stories, and some essays.
Right on. Yeah. Okay.
And like
Well,
I'd say there's maybe two books like um that will come out of all that.
very cool. Well,
Yeah.
we're looking forward to that for sure.
Well,
Absolutely.
I that's great. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know like whether people are in. It doesn't feel like that many people are interested, to tell you the truth.
Hmm.
Um,
It's
so
tough out there.
yeah, like, and so I'm not really too. I don't really like think I need to do anything that right away, or I don't
No,
feel
dude.
like people are waiting for me to do anything. So it's more
No,
about like my own quality of life than anything,
yeah.
and the
Honestly, in
quality of
this,
the work too. The quality of the
right,
work.
sure. I think the more I sort of meditate on this and think about it, like the sort of attention economy we're in and the pace of things and the like pace of expectations, like taking your time is like a quasi revolutionary act now. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? To like really just like, no, I'm just gonna, it'll happen. Like it's
Well,
like what about
and
the
then
algorithm? You know, it's like
sure. And then
yeah.
and I forgot to mention this, like when we were talking about like the difference or like some of the pressure of writing a long form piece of fiction.
Mhm.
And one thing, and I mentioned this when I was getting turned up talking to Brendan
Mm.
on Tales from the Mall
Oh
this
yeah.
most recent time.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's something, I think that's like a novel writing to me goes with this pathology of productivity. And I'm just totally a dead set against it. Like I do not want to live that way in a manic,
Right.
flailing, creative delirium. Like, no way. I'm not
Yeah.
doing it. I'm not doing
You're
it. Like I've
heard, man.
been
Yeah.
there, done that. I don't like it.
Fair
I'm
enough.
not
Yeah.
going back there.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that's so it's all. I think it all has to be holistic, and quality of
I,
work should be related to quality of life. And
amen. Yeah, I respect
you
the hell
know,
out of that. Yeah.
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 And
Well, folks,
that's why I'm
yeah.
not like well, I know you're gonna ask me one more thing though. You're gonna ask me
Yeah,
one more
well,
thing. And
well, I th
I'm glad to
yeah.
address it. I'm glad to address it. I'm
Yeah.
glad to. And I
Oh
think it
yeah,
could
that's
be
right.
interesting for some people.
Yeah, yeah. So you and I had some conversations and you've just recently deactivated your Twitter account.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I just kind of wanted to, I mean, the general question, I have a sense of why, but
Mm-hmm.
why?
Well, I just don't think that literary activities go with social media at all. I think they're anathema to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes me feel like shit, and I hate it. Like it's just doesn't do anything
Right,
for my
right.
writing and for my experience writing and reading. And it doesn't really translate to more sales either.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe a couple
Yeah,
here and there,
probably
but
marginally it would. Yeah,
a little bit, but not a lot though, and
you're not
not worth
talking, it's not a
not
order of
thousands of
magnitude.
copies,
Right. It's not an
not
order of
thousands of
magnitude
copies.
difference. Right.
No.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's not worth it.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
worth it. And like
Yeah,
some
I get
people might
that.
disagree with me, and some
Mhm.
people might have a good time on there and enjoy it, and that's cool. That's
Mhm.
cool. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to go back on it. I just did it, to market this new book.
Right.
Um, and if I have another book come out, I won't go
Yeah.
back on it again.
Right. Right. Well,
No, I'm
just
not going to go back
yeah.
on it.
Put me on your email list so when it comes out I know about it.
Well, I'm
So
sure like
I won't miss it.
well,
Yeah.
I'm not going to work with anyone who won't market a book.
Right. Right.
So you
Right.
just,
Yeah.
the publisher would be doing that work.
Right.
And I
Right.
mean, like, and they're going to do that work anyway. And me being on there doesn't really, I don't think, make a ton of difference.
Right.
And
And
if I'm not enjoying it, and if it doesn't make me feel good, then that should be something that's respected, and I shouldn't
Mhm.
need to do that, you
Amen.
know.
Yeah.
And
Amen. Yeah.
it's not a game. It's not like a I'm not doing that to be difficult or to be disrespectful or ungrateful
Sure.
or anything. It's just like my stance on it.
I think we all got to be careful because they are. I mean, I'm active on Twitter. I don't really mess with other social media very much, but
Mm-hmm,
I mean, I have a sort of a love-hate relationship with it. I know it sort of reprograms my brain throughout the day to a certain degree.
mm-hmm.
Um, I've set timers so I can only be on there a certain amount every day, and then I don't have access for the rest of the day. So that's like
Well, that's
my
good.
one thing that sort of, but I have an addiction to it. You scroll and you scroll, and you're like, oh, did somebody like it? And then you're like, who cares if anybody liked it? Like, you know what I mean? There gets to be this very uh perverse incentives going on
Oh
that
yeah.
I don't like. And I definitely know, like, if I see myself starting to behave sort of negatively on there
Mm-hmm,
by my own metrics, I know
mm-hmm.
it's time I gotta like get off for the day at least, if not longer than that. But yeah, it's like a drug. You have to be careful with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like uh it is. It's like it's doing the same thing a drug like alcohol or cocaine or something would do. And I think thinking about it in those terms can be helpful. It's okay to have a drink every once in a while, but if you're like getting drunk before you get out of bed, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah. So,
like just to me, like I mean, and I think all everything that you said is legit. It's
mhm.
um and well taken. It's just for me, like it doesn't have anything to do with my books and my papers and the walks I take,
Yep.
conversations I have, and the writing I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah,
It doesn't
yeah,
have
yeah.
anything to do with it at all.
Right, right, right. And
And
yeah,
so there's no point,
amen. I'm with you.
you know?
I'm with
And
you. It
like
might, yeah.
and if someone else is into it and it's part of what they're doing, totally cool. I don't mind. I like it's
Yeah,
not it's just me personally how I feel about it,
right.
right?
No, I like it. I think the sort of the best version of me agrees with you and like
Yeah.
wants to deactivate my phone, deactivate my account, delete my account. And then there's just
Mm,
that part of me that's like, well, but I'm gonna put a podcast episode out, and you know what I mean? Like, how am I gonna get
exactly.
so,
Yeah.
maybe
I
there's
think it
a
works. It'll work. It works for some stuff. Good.
right. Yeah, yeah. I think there's probably a longer term strategy thinking about how I use it a little bit more carefully. So I'm sort of,
Sure.
it's cliche to say, but so I'm sort of using it instead of sort of falling into its lures and the dopaminergic cycles
Sure.
that it runs you through.
Oh, that
So
sounds cooler than what it is.
yeah. Right.
That sounds pretty cool, actually. Maybe I'll get
Yeah,
that on there.
yeah. Right. You mean I can get some dopamine off this thing? No, I
Yeah,
just
dope.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Get the
You
dope.
just gotta think of your brain as it's more than this, but it also is biochemical, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
it's doing things to you.
Hmm.
And it's at least you have to at least be cognizant of that, even if you don't do much to affect or control it. But
Hmm.
um so yeah, I'm gonna let you have the rest of your evening, Dustin. I really appreciate this. And it's been a little while since we talked, but I'm so glad you were willing to come on and chat with me. I'm very excited about After Sunstone. I'm very excited about Farthest Heaven. I'll have
Hmm.
links to this stuff. People, if you're looking for contemporary poetry, this is where you click the link and buy the book. Support Dustin, support what Farthest Heaven's doing.
Hmm.
The contemporary poetry scene is difficult. There's a lot of stuff out there and a lot of good stuff out there. It doesn't get the kind of attention that it maybe used to in some prior era, but when people put out a good piece of work, um, I really think it's important to try and support this stuff. So
Yeah.
links will be
I
in the
agree. I
description.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Buy my book. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Bye.
no,
Yeah.
but Brad, like, thank you
Yeah.
so much. It's
Of
always a
course,
pleasure
man.
to talk to you. You're great to talk to. So
I enjoyed
my
talking to you
pleasure.
too, Dustin. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like,
We'll talk.
love talking. I love talking to Sebald. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
I don't ever
absolutely. Well,
get to have a conversation about him very often.
I,
So
I don't. Yeah, me neither. This is the first time I've ever had a conversation about him. So this was all my pleasure for sure. And we'll find another reason to talk sometime down the road.
sounds good. Well, you
All
have a
right.
good evening, Brad. And
Yeah,
all the
thanks.
best. All the best with your own work.
I appreciate that. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Talk soon. No problem.
Thank you.